In this video, I'll show you how to perform a grouping and aggregation within FetchXml. Now, there are options which are available to perform grouping and aggregation while using the FetchXml query. You can perform a sum, average, max, min, count column uh, using the FetchXml grouping capability. Now, null values aren't considered when calculating the aggregate value, so you need to be aware of this feature. Also, queries that return aggregate functions are limited to 50,000 records. Now, let me show you an example. Now, here, before you even perform an aggregation, you need to specify this attribute aggregate equal to true against the fetch element. And then once you do that, under attribute, so you select an attribute, you need to specify the alias, okay? And then you specify the aggregate attribute. Aggregate value can be sum, average, min, count column, etc. I'm going to cover that in the demonstration. So let me open the XRM toolbox. So in XRM toolbox, I have installed FetchXML builder. Now I'm going to use the FetchXML builder to query. Now I have this table, airline table, which is a custom table which I'm using for the demonstration. So this is a custom table. If I list airlines and if I just execute this, it will list down all the records. Okay, so these are all the records. This is the name of all the airlines. Now I will demonstrate the aggregate thing. Now, in order to demonstrate aggregate, you cannot use the things which you just want to display. Okay, so first example is, let me pick up an attribute and I will say total aircrafts. Okay, so I have this total aircraft which is like a column of type integer. Now these are list of total aircraft. Now when you perform an aggregation, you need to go into that specific entity. Now this is your fetch xml, fetch entity attribute etc, right? Now if I want to do an aggregation, I'll go to this entity. Okay, I'll go to the top level over here and I'll say aggregate. So the moment I do aggregate, it will put aggregate equal to true. And now let's run it and see what happens. It will throw an error. It will say an attribute cannot be requested when an aggregate operation has been specified. So what you need to do is go into this attribute and then specify an alias. So alias is, for me it is say sum, so I'm demonstrating sum. And then you specify the aggregate value what you want. So I'll say sum, and then as you see over here, it has built the fetch xml. Now let's see if it runs properly or not. Click on execute and then it will give you the sum. Now remember, for the alias we have just said it's sum, so sum of aircraft. Similarly, I can add another attribute. Now let me add another attribute of type, say just type in as name. Okay. Now if I put in name and if I put alias as say name and execute it, it will give an error. It needs to be a numeric type and also it needs to perform some aggregation. So for that, we cannot use name. Now instead of name, I will just type in same column total aircraft. But this time I will say I don't want the sum, but I want the average. And here I'll select average, see the code, execute this. This is the sum of aircraft, total aircraft. This is the average of the aircrafts, total aircraft that are available. Similarly, I will add an attribute. Again, same total aircrafts. And this time I will pick up the maximum value. So I'll call it as max. See the fetch XML? Max. I can even go ahead and add another attribute. Same thing, total aircraft, but this time I will add min. You can put whatever alias you want, but I'll just pick the same as aggregate value, put it as min, and execute it. So this will give me the list of the aircraft for sum, average, max, and min. So you got the sum, you got the average, you got a max, and you got a min. Similarly, you can just do another attribute. You can just say add attribute, and this time we can say pick up that same column, total aircraft, and instead of alias I'll just say column, and aggregate will give you the count of the column. Once you're done with this, just run, and then you will see the column is 12. So that means what is this is basically it will give you the number of rows. So the column will give you the number of rows. So in my example, in my backend database table, like let me show you that table. So I have a list of airlines and there are around 12 records and it is giving me that value. So the output which you got over here is 12. If you want to see the fetch XML, this is how the fetch XML will look like. You have an attribute and you have the aggregate values listed over here. So that's it, folks. This is how you basically use the aggregate function within fetch XML. Thanks for watching.